Welcome to Education 101 with your host, Eric Wolfram. Education 101 is about the amazing education community we have in the greater Spokane area. We highlight the outstanding programs, teachers, supporters, and opportunities of the education community in the Spokane region. Education 101 is brought to you in part by STCU. Here's Eric.
And welcome to Education 101. I'm your host, Eric Wolfram. Today I'm pretty excited to be talking about the whole idea of humanizing the education that we see in our classrooms with our kids. And with me today to talk about that, we've got Monte Syrie, who is a teacher out at Cheney High School, an English teacher out there, and has done some work around this. Gotten to read some of the articles that you've written and so on, and some of the experiences that you've had. And so I'm excited to have him here to be able to talk about some of those experiences along the way and how you make this happen, because you've got some pretty cool stories that I'm excited to hear. So welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm
Excellent.
glad to be here. It's awesome.
That's great. I'm glad to have you here. So let's start about this. Let's start with the whole idea of humanizing education. So how do you define that piece?
Okay, how much time do you have, Eric?
I know.
So this is what I think. I'm going to start really simply.
Okay.
I think when we think about humanizing education, we have to start with, I think, what creates connections in education. I think about what creates connections in society, and that's beginning with how people feel.
Okay.
And so when I think about humanizing education, I think about thinking about feelings, because I think that's what makes us human.
Right.
And so, you know, how does that translate into the classroom? I think it begins with a simple question, and that simple question is, how do we want kids to feel in our classroom?
Absolutely.
For me, I have come up with what I call my own self-standards, if you will. And so as I think about that question, and I think deeply about it, and I think about my experiences with my kids, I think about, okay, when they walk through my door, when they cross that threshold, I am in charge of how they feel. The things that I do or the things that I don't do have an impact on the feelings that my kids are going to have.
Right.
And one of the things I think that we know about education, whether you're in education or not, is we remember how we felt. You know, I don't remember what my 10th grade biology teacher taught me from a particular unit or a lesson, but I do remember how he made me feel.
Right. And isn't that Maya Angelou big statement about won't remember what they said?
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
They feel,
and I think Maya should get a lot of credit for that, you know, but I think as we think back, and again, whether we're in education or not, we think back on our own experiences, it really comes down to how that teacher made me feel. And so I really kind of latched onto that. And so as I took it further, I thought, well, these are the 6 ways that I want kids to feel in my class. I want them to first feel connected. Okay. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel respected, valued, and I also want them to feel challenged and supported. Okay.
Excellent.
And so on my door, I have those 6 standards, and I also have the question, how am I doing? Because I invite my kids to let me know
That's a great idea.
how I'm doing all year long in respect to those particular things. Now, it's one thing to put them on one's door, right? But how do you make that happen in the classroom?
Right.
You know, and so I had to think about, if I'm going to make this my number one charge, if these are going to be the standards that I'm going to live by, then they have to come into fruition. They have to come to fruition in the classroom.
Right.
And so over the last couple of years, I've had to really think differently, if you will, about how I'm going to make decisions with both curriculum and assessment and instruction, and in terms of like, can I carry it forth? You know, so for example, when I say I want kids to feel connected, right? I mean more than just doing icebreakers at the beginning of the year, you know, because what I worry about icebreakers, you know, is like we get going, you know, it's September, we do that first week of icebreakers, get to know our kids. Well, if we don't continue to thaw the ice soon reforms. And I don't think anybody ever does it intentionally, but we get so busy in our hurried, harried existence that sometimes we forget about. We have to continue to make connections with kids.
Right.
You know, once upon a time, and I still do it. I do an activity called Community Circle, and so we would sit for on Fridays around the room, and we would just talk about various topics from what's your favorite candy to what haunts you, what keeps you up at night. And so I found the power in being able to connect with kids on that level, and it came at the cost of contact time or instructional time.
Sure.
I did that for an hour a week. I wanted to find a way that I could make that happen every single day and still get to the meat of the matter with the content and the other things that I'm responsible for as a high school teacher. And so we had done it for a long time in our department. We began with an activity called Smiles and Frowns.
Okay.
And the reason I did it as department chair is because, as you know, when teachers get together, despite the agenda, they first want to kind of talk about the water cooler things.
Oh, yeah.
And so I found it to be a distraction. And so I thought, you know what, let's connect personally first. Let's get these things off our chest, share a smile, share a frown, and then we'll get to our agenda and get to our work. And so then I thought, you know what, I think we can start this in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that. And so what I do now is every day at the beginning, right after I take attendance, the very first thing we do is an activity called Smiles and Frowns.
Okay.
So the kids and I go around and we share a smile and or a frown.
Uh-huh.
But importantly, I let the kids pass.
Yeah.
And the reason I let this pass is because I don't think we feel connected when we're forced to comply. So
Yes.
I want the kids to commit. And so I think for anybody who ever wants to do this, I think you have to let kids pass. This is not something that we're going to force kids to do. And so I have also come up with a song, all right, that I use to start that every day. And I told my kids I would sing this on air today.
I think we better hear it.
May I do that? But I
Yes.
want to give credit to Mr. Rogers first.
Oh,
all right?
good.
So
Good.
because it's on the way home from Tennessee that I first had this idea watching his "Won't You Be My Neighbor" documentary.
I just watched that the other day.
And so I was, my eyes were leaking on the plane
Yeah.
back from Tennessee, and I thought, you know what, I am going to channel Mr. Rogers the best I can. So this is going to be my attempt here.
Okay,
Eric. All
that
right.
sounds good. Go for it.
It's a beautiful day for smiles and frowns. Won't you share your ups and downs? Won't you share? We all care. Won't you share your story? And so from there, and the kids sing it with me, and then from there we all go around the room and we share our smiles and frowns. It takes roughly 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
We do it no matter what, even on assessment days.
Good
the kids
deal.
know. Today was the first day we didn't do it. The kids had to register for next year's classes.
Okay.
And so the counselors were in there this morning, and or all day rather, and the kids are like, well, what about smiles and frowns? And so
Isn't
it has
it
really
amazing that
become a
they're-
huge part of our culture. And I just recently asked a question, if smiles and frowns went away, would you be okay? And not surprisingly, the kids said, no, we love smiles and frowns, it's got to stay. But what surprised me most, Eric, was I have some perpetual passers, kids who pass all the time. Kids who just, they're not comfortable sharing out loud about themselves. But to a kid, they said, no, I don't want this to go away. There's a lot of value in just listening to other people and learning about them. And so when I say I want kids connected, we have to know each other to be connected.
I think so. And I think that's such a great thing. And even the passing thing, along the way. And I love to hear the idea that even the kids that pass often, they don't want it to go away.
They don't.
And that might not even be the idea of them getting the opportunity to hear from others. There's that connect, but being able to take 5 minutes and reflect on themselves, whether they share it or not. How often do we allow that, in our classrooms? The other interesting thing that I think about as you talk through this is the first thing that comes to my mind is you're a high school teacher,
right?
And this is happening in a high school classroom.
Yep.
And I would say that I would probably not be surprised if it was elementary, because I think we do a better job of this at the elementary level, and we forget about that as we move further and further in the kids' education. So I truly love the idea of having this at the high school level and being able to have some of these reflective self-conversations, and building the connection. I love that idea, too, of building connection.
Well, I'm so glad you brought up the elementary piece because, some time ago, and I don't remember if it was Mike Dunn who first said it or someone, but, maybe I heard it from someone else, but maybe Mike, is that, a big difference between elementary teachers and high school
Mm-hmm.
teachers is elementary teachers teach kids.
Yeah.
High school teachers, secondary, teach content.
content.
And I think that's one of the most important things I ever learned as a teacher, a young teacher, is understanding the things that my elementary colleagues do and the way that they connect with kids. And I think we see that diminishes over the course of our kids' educational experiences.
Right.
And I think much to our detriment, not only in education, but I think also in society, because I think by the time we shove them out the door in high school, into the real world, if you will, they're already feeling disconnected. And I want kids to feel connected the entire way through. And so that is why I do what I do, because I think everything begins and ends. I think classroom culture begins and ends with connection and how we feel connected to the world. And so that's why I do Smiles and Frowns every single day.
And it's so important. I think that culture piece is so important. You start to think about Maslow's hierarchy, and what's those first steps are making sure that you are comfortable and you're in a safe place. And we have to build that culture to be able to even get past that, to have the kids learning content. And that's the piece we forget about.
And that is not to take the emphasis off of content. I mean, content is still important, but I don't think it's more important than the humans in the room. And so what I tell my kids is we start with you, because I think there's nothing more important in the room than you.
Right.
And so we start with you every single day. That content's going to be there.
It is.
And I think we know that, but I think sometimes, particularly in our standardized era, we're in such a rush to get through so much content because we worry about what is or isn't going to be on the state test, that there's that difficulty that we encounter as practitioners about like making a decision and trying to find that balance. I mean, I teach 10th grade language arts. I've been doing the state assessment game for a long time.
Oh, yes, you
and
have.
so for me, I don't take lightly the responsibility that I have to help kids get through the state assessment. But I also don't take light the responsibility that I have to nurture the dignity and the humanity of my kids, and that's why I connect with them every single day. And I believe, Eric, we can do both. I really do. I think we can find that balance.
Well, and that's what you talked about, was finding that balance between standards, which we have, but then also the humanizing side on the other side of the house as well. And I think it sounds like you're doing it. I love the idea too that you're pulled from little Fred Rogers. Mr. Rogers. I like even the he got his cardigan.
I'm trying.
You're bringing him through.
I'm trying. I don't know if I did him much justice. And my
did.
kids they kind of laughed the first time I sang it, but now they sing along with me, and it's become part of our culture and part of our routine. So I would hope I would do Mr. Rogers proud.
I think you would. I tell you what, why don't we take a little break, and then when we come back, let's continue this conversation around the whole idea of how do we humanize education. So we'll be right back.
Awesome.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
I'm Jade Becker, and I'm a senior at Chewelah High School. I'm at STCU's Money Live event. In this scenario that we played today, I was a realtor. My spouse was a city worker. We had an 11-month-old child, and there was a lot of spending for that child, like diapers and formula, and had to buy toys and clothing. I'm very glad that I had this experience. It was super helpful. You need this to get far and ahead in life. I'm Jade Becker, and STCU is here for good.
The following is sponsored by our friends and community supporters at McNeese Wheeler Attorneys. McNeese Wheeler is a boutique law firm in Spokane, handling matters in both Washington and Idaho. Areas of law include business law, wills, trusts and estates, family law, personal injury and wrongful death, and real estate matters. For your full-service legal needs, contact McNeese Wheeler Attorneys.
And welcome back to Education 101, talking about the whole idea of humanizing education with Monte Syrie. And so before we left, on a break, we were talking about that connection piece, which is big. I want to kind of come back to, again, I got the opportunity to read a couple of your articles, and one of them that struck me was one about a girl sleeping in your class. So that one struck me. I think I'm right on the same page as you in some of that, and in my experiences as a teacher as well. I think there are times when we don't understand what all is going on in the kids, and we forget that piece. I talk often. I taught at Gary Middle School, and in the beginning, we get kids, middle school kids. I get that, but we not turn in homework and those kinds of things. And in the beginning, it was, you give me an excuse, and I'd say, all right, I understand, but. And man, it did not take me long to start to understand what kids are going through on a daily basis. And that phrase left. I didn't use that phrase because I don't understand. And I still, there are a lot of kids out there that it's not how I grew up. It's not my life now, but I know that they're going through hardships. And so I think that really struck me when I read that article about the opportunity for that, letting that girl sleep. And it wasn't an everyday thing, but it was that day. So
I think on that day, and it's funny. We were talking before the show about what takes flight on social media and what doesn't. And so I never imagined I'd become the teacher who was known as the guy who lets kids sleep in class. But for me, on that day, in that moment, Eric, and I've had similar moments since, and I imagine I'll have some similar moments from here on. Is thinking about what the kid needs versus what I want. Right. In that moment, I believed she needed most to rest. No, she didn't get her essay done in class that day. But as it was brought up in the article, she went home and finished that night and emailed it to me. And so all good, right? And so for me, it was possible for me to make that happen. In my room, I try to create a realm of possibility, right? And I think in education, more often than not, the difference between impossible and possible in the classroom is a decision of the teacher. We often, want to point to outside elements and outside forces, and those come to bear sometimes. But I think as a former teacher and one who spends still a lot of time in the classroom, know that really the buck stops with the teacher in terms of the decisions that are made, whether it's taking late work, whether it's a kid can hand in something late or do a retake. I mean, the list goes on, right? And so for me, I saw a possibility there. I thought it better served her needs than my wants, which was get your essay done this period. And so and that's really how I I think if you talk to my kids, they would say, that's how Cy operates. It's about what we need and finding that balance. I mean, he doesn't forget about what he wants, but there are other times and ways that those things can come into play. And so I work really hard to make that happen. And again, to me, that goes back to the humanization of it, you know.
Does.
And some people would suggest that in the real world you don't get breaks, you don't get extended deadlines. That's just not true. It's just not true. There are some harsh examples out there. Of course there are. But for me, it's just like if I can make the world a better place for the kids right now, you know, and whose worlds are real enough, by the way. I mean, I think we know that. I think we forget that sometimes, though. Our kids have to deal with a lot, and so I've never really subscribed to this idea of like we have to prepare them for the real world, or when they get into the real world, they'll get some hard lessons. They will. Probably, right?
Oh, they will.
But I think right now my concern is their world at this moment, and so I try to meet them where they are and do the best I can to meet their needs. And even if sometimes that comes against my wants, if you will.
And I think that's a piece we'd have a tendency to forget, and I'm guilty of that as an educator as well, as we forget. It's their world. And as a middle school teacher, I mean, my gosh, I'd talk about just middle school kids as it is. That's a whole world in itself that
absolutely.
we've got to be cognizant of along the way. You know, and you mentioned that the whole idea of the buck stops with the teacher. And shoot, I'm over 20 years now in this field, and the one thing that I continue to learn and appreciate are the adults that are in the classroom.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference.
Yeah.
You know, and that comes from the education side, but the parent side too.
Yeah,
you know, once you
absolutely.
start to see your own kids actually in these classrooms and how they
Absolutely.
interact with their
Absolutely.
with the teachers. I mean,
Yeah.
I can already think about with my boys some of the teachers that they've had that, man, brought the best out of them.
Absolutely.
And it's the teacher and how they react and
Yeah.
work with the kids.
Yeah. And I think, you know, part of my making the decisions that I do is knowing that, you know, and knowing that, you know, out of all the things that matter in education in terms of having impact on kids, I think we can generally agree now as a system, it's teachers who matter most when it comes to having that impact. And so I've thought of, like, how can I have an even greater impact? It is not enough for me just to be one who facilitates, you know, the content. You know, it's just like I have an opportunity to connect with these kids. And if I know that this is what they're going to remember, I can capitalize on that.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe, and I think coaches know this. I think teachers know this. You know, we can get more out of kids when we have them, you know, but we can't, I can't have them by getting up there and talking about, you know, literature. Some of them maybe, you know,
some.
but not enough of them. And so I want to get them first before we get to the content, because I believe I can get more out of them when they trust me, when they respect me, and they know that I trust and respect them in return, and I try to show that every single day.
Well, and I think one of the pieces that the way that you show that is you mentioned that you put "How am I doing?" on my door. You know, that vulnerability, and there is some vulnerability with that, to be able to put that out there and say, it's okay. Tell me, be honest with me, and let's talk about this.
And I
It's
tell
okay.
my kids, like, please don't be teacher pleasers on this. You know, I really want to know. You know, one instance last year, a girl asked me if I had considered gender pronoun references, and you know, and for me, it's like I need to ask my kids that. I need to ask them what pronoun they prefer, and I've done a better job of that since. And so she brought it to my attention. And it's funny, she even framed it like, I don't want to offend you. I'm not trying to hurt you. But it's like, have you considered asking your kids about this? And so for me, it was an eye-opening moment. It really was.
That's great. You know, we really touched on that connect piece. And I know you have 6 different pieces.
Yes, I do.
What are some of the other things that you do?
Well, you know, one of the more radical things, if I can share that, you know, one of the things I talk about is the second on the list is I want my kids to feel empowered. Okay. Right. And what I mean by that is I want them to own their learning. Okay. And I think we say that a lot in education. I say, you know, it's your learning, you've got to own it. But what I mean by that is, like, I'm not just you know, shoving them out on their own. What I'm saying is, like, it's your learning, and you're going to benefit from it or you're not. You know, I care about your learning, but 10 years from now, it's not going to matter to me, kiddo, but it's going to matter for you. And so I think to empower kids to own their learning, we have to give them opportunities to fail and fail again. And what I mean by that is, I think one of the most important things we can do to empower kids, Eric, is to give them an opportunity to demonstrate again or in various ways that they understand the content or the standards that we're trying to meet in class. You know, so I guess what I mean by that is, like, we want kids to have a growth mindset. We want them to own their learning, but I don't think we do a great job of that in education. I think we create fixed mindsets. And the reason I think that is, like, my third grade daughter already hates math and is pretty sure she's going to be bad at it for the rest of her life. You know, she didn't come to that on her own. No. You know, and so, and by the time they get to us in 10th grade, they have fixed mindsets. They're this kind of reader, they're this kind of writer, they're this kind of math student. That's true. And so I feel like if we're going to give kids ownership, we have to give them true ownership. We have to give them that responsibility. And so I have found one way that I do that is not only allow retakes, but I also ask kids to come to the table at the end of the semester, and we have a grading conference. And so they come with their portfolio, which has evidence over the course of the semester, and they come to the conference saying, Cy, this is the grade I believe I have earned this semester. And we stay in the conversation until we come to an agreement. You know, it's not just about Eric showing up and saying, oh, I want an A. Yeah. Right? Hey. But it's like, Eric wants an A. It's like, okay, so Eric, why do you think you have earned that A? And so then we turn to the evidence in the portfolio. I like it. And we have to come to an agreement on that. And I think by doing that, we empower kids to realize it is my learning. And because I think it's something that I'm trying to do, like, I want kids to believe that education is something we do with or for them, not to them. And I think too often, when kids say, "Oh, he gave me a B," it's like it's completely out of their hands, like they had no control over it. And I think we can do better with that. And so I invite my kids to participate in selecting their grade for the semester based on the evidence that they have compiled over the course of this semester. And it has been fantastic. Kids really respond to it well. Parents respond to it well. And it's given me the opportunity to truly not just pay lip service to, but truly give them ownership of their learning.
Right. At one point, you talked about we don't do, and I may get this wrong, we don't do a good job of getting them, or don't believe in preparing them for the real world.
Right.
I'm going to push on you on that, because what you're doing, I think, in that process, not only are they getting the opportunity to show their learning, they're getting the opportunity to advocate for themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that truly is a real world application piece, probably more important than the content that's sitting there, but being able to say, whether it's going into a job interview and saying, here's my brag book, if you will. Here's the things that I've done and what I can do.
Or as a teacher coming to the TPEP table, right?
That in itself, exactly. I mean, that's the other thing that I was thinking is this is so like what administrators are asking teachers to do, and what district leaders are asking principals to do as well, is to be able to show evidence along the way.
Right.
One of the other things that I know that you do is you end each day in a certain way.
Yep.
And we're getting short on time here. And I know we could probably have part 2, part 3, part 4 in this, because I could talk this all day long. I know.
I've got lots to share.
But, I know you started our day with your song to be talking about smiles and frowns, right?
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, you end your class in a certain way.
Yes.
Again, and I know you promised the kids that this would be something that you would do.
Yes, I did.
And so I'm going to let you end this session.
Okay. Awesome.
With what you do every day.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. So we end each day with something I call Sappy Sci Rhyme. And I do this every single day. They're original rhymes that I write for my kids. This is my second full year of doing it.
All right.
And going back to my standards, one of my standards is I want kids to feel valued. And so I want them to feel like I value them, and I'm going to miss them until I see them again the next day. And so I want my words to be the last words as they leave the door. This one's a little different. This one's to teachers and to administrators and educators. This one's not to my kids, but normally my kids are my audience.
All right.
Okay. So this one is called The World They Change. We can't do all, but we can always do more to connect and support them when they come through our door. If we choose to look, I think we'll see we can make the world better, you and me. We can feed them kindness and help them connect. And when they look back and one day reflect on what it was that helped them through, it was the connections created by me and you. So for all, each boy, each girl, let's show them right now a better world. So maybe they'll find the real world strange, expecting more and better in the world they change. Sappy Sci Rhyme.
Humanizing education.
Trying to.
Nothing else I can say to that except, Monty, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for being on it or watching Education 101 today. See you next time.
Education 101 is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Education 101 is brought to you by our friends at STCU. Ask Eric a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com.